Thank you very much, Prof. Gretzel, for the very nice talk. Now, the next speaker, Professor Eicke Weber, is a familiar name in PV community in the world. He is presently a professor of material science at UC Berkeley, and he has been serving as the president of the Association of European Renewable Energy Research Center. So he has many hats in Europe, in US, and in Singapore. He is the director or CEO of the BEARS, Berkeley Education Alliance for Research in Singapore. So without further ado, let us welcome Professor Eicke Weber.
Thank you. I must say I'm very humbled to be here in this illustrious coming together, and of course we are all honored that we can share with you the occasion of the honorary doctorate degree tomorrow. And of course I would like to join as well the congratulations to your wonderful birthday. So for many, many years of further productive work, as you has demonstrated to us, so fantastic. The topic of my talk is quite a bit more down to earth, but I think when we talk about all of this, what you have shown so very, very eloquently, you know, that we all live from the sun. The sun is a huge nuclear fusion reactor, and we are lucky that it's far enough away that we have ways to harvest it through solar photovoltaics, through wind, through water. Then, of course, let's see how far we are in the real development of this technology. And this is, if this works. Because honestly speaking, when I look at my own slides from 5 or 10 years ago, I can tell you my own slides were not optimistic enough to describe what we really experienced in the last 10 years in the technology. Thank you. Yes. Photovoltaics is now really moving into the terawatt age. We are not longer talking only about megawatts and gigawatts. And of course, we have already seen terawatt numbers from the energy from the sun, but now we can talk about terawatt numbers converting sun to useful electricity. Germany has started this process, honestly speaking, by introducing a very effective financing mechanism at a time when solar conversion to electricity by photovoltaics was incredibly expensive, that it made only sense to do it for space applications, for powering satellites up in space. In Germany, they found a very effective way to offer to investors a way to invest in solar by the so-called feed-in tariff. Anybody who created solar electricity became 50 cents per kilowatt hour, which was far above electricity rates at that time, but which allowed already at this time, 1990 and onwards, to invest in this technology. And you see the big change came in the last 10 years when we are right now actually at a level of about 40 gigawatts of photovoltaic and 40 gigawatts of wind installed in Germany. And these two numbers already, I should mention, have a very big significance because the German peak electricity demand is 80 gigawatts. That means already today, at a favorable place, at a favorable time, 100% of all electricity needs can be covered just from these two techniques. And because we still have a lot of conventional power plants, coal-fired power plants, nuclear-fired power plants, in these moments of good sunshine and good wind, we have plenty of electricity, excess electricity. And this is exactly what we have heard already. This will be the future. In the future, we will have at certain times electricity available for almost nothing. And then, of course, we are very interested to develop technologies which convert the electricity into useful fuels, as we have heard it, processes which make no sense if you use electricity from the wall plug from conventional power plants, but which make lots of sense in this situation that we have a high fraction of renewable energies available so that we have at certain time excess electricity. And of course, the key to all of this development was the so-called learning curve of photovoltaics. And this is the learning curve of crystalline silicon photovoltaics, coming down by more than an order of magnitude. And what is important in such a learning curve, the horizontal axis of the decrease of cost is not time. This was not achieved simply by waiting on 5 more years. The horizontal axis is installed capacity. So by really pushing this curve along, by going from the single gigawatt to 10 and 100 gigawatt range, we came down today to a cost of solar electricity in the order of a few cents per kilowatt hour. As a matter of fact, this graph is from the institute which I had the honor to direct at that time, and we expected that by 2050 we would be talking about cost of solar electricity between 2 and 4 cents per kilowatt hour. The latest number from Dubai is 2.4 cents, and this is dollar cents per kilowatt hour in 2016. So this is what I mentioned before. The development was much, much faster than even the wildest optimist had expected. That we now can look at solar electricity for something like 2 cents per kilowatt hour beats all other ways to create electricity useful for humankind. And this is really the engine for the transition into the terawatt range I want to talk about. Just a little bit about technologies. It's all crystalline silicon technology. You see, 90% of the current market is dominated by crystalline silicon PV technology. It is still divided into high efficiency monocrystalline and a little bit lower efficiency but lower cost, so-called multi-crystalline silicon, where you don't have to grow single crystals. There is still a small fraction of about 10% of thin film, mainly governed by one company, First Solar, which makes cadmium telluride thin film PV, and they don't sell the modules, they sell electricity, and therefore they can make business out of this. But even, and this is an important message, crystalline silicon technology is not yet a commodity technology like a light bulb. There is a lot of technology development going on in improving crystalline silicon technologies to decrease the cost and to increase the performance. I will show you a few of these designs here. For instance, the standard silicon solar cell has on the backside an aluminum layer as backside contact. But an aluminum layer in contact to silicon is as well a carrier recombination center. So you lose carriers when they come to the metal silicon contact. It is, of course, convenient to have a contact all across the area because you get a very good electrical connection, but it is not necessary to have a contact all along because carriers in silicon can diffuse micrometers up to millimeters. So it is completely sufficient to have individual contact points and to cover the silicon with a good passivation layer. So you will have as good a contact by posing, for instance, with a laser 10,000 contact points and having 99% of the back surface very well passivated, for instance, by SiO2 or Al2O3, which is known as sapphire. And in this way, you boost the performance by 1 to 1.5 absolute percentage points. You can use metal wrap-through. You can bring the front side contact to the back side. You can use heterojunction layers, which would be an amorphous layer on top. So these are all the technologies which are right now in the process of entering the marketplace and bringing further down the cost, increasing the higher the efficiency. Actually, in the institute which I directed till the end of last year, we developed a technology which uses an insulating layer as a contact. You would say an insulating layer is an insulating layer and just the opposite of a contact. But there is this very exciting physical phenomenon of tunneling. If you make the insulating layer thin enough and you can control this well enough, you can use it as a contact. And of course, this contact has fantastic carrier passivation properties because for minority carriers it is refusing and therefore it is excellent for passivation. But if you make it thin enough, just a few angstroms, and it cannot be much more because otherwise the resistance will be too high, then you can make good solar cells. So 24.9% is a very highly respectable value. The world record for a silicon solar cell is at the moment at 26%. However, at Eicke, we have beaten this world record, but of course not with a simple homojunction solar cell, with a heterojunction cell with 3,5, with a gallium arsenide cell wafer bonded off top, and we have for the first time broken through the glass ceiling, because all textbooks say correctly with a silicon solar cell you cannot go more than 29% of efficiency, but of course with such a heterojunction concept there is no more 30% ceiling, and I expect exactly what Michael Gretzel has mentioned. We can of course do this. This with gallium arsenide wafer bonding is much too expensive. This is no production technology. But if we can put a perovskite structure on top, I see no reason why we shouldn't come to 30–35% in a normal crystalline silicon technology, cost efficient, very exciting. Let me finish the discussion of the current state-of-the-art PV technologies talking about another heterojunction approach. You see, the problem with silicon is at the band edge, it has a near 100% quantum efficiency. So the red area shows the power you can extract out of the sunlight, and the gray shaded area is the spectrum of the solar spectrum as it comes to the Earth with all the absorption bands by the molecules in the atmosphere. At the band edge, we have 100% efficiency. At energies below the band edge, we have transparency, we don't collect them, and at energies above the band edge, we absorb them, but we absorb them only with the band edge of silicon. The rest is thermal losses. If a 2-electron-volt photon hits silicon, we still can harvest only one. And this is why we get this so-called Schottky-Queisser limit of 29%. But of course, if we make heterojunctions, then we can harvest different parts of the sunlight with different materials. And the traditional way to do this is to do this in 3/5, for instance, on a germanium substrate basis. Germanium is very good for the more infrared part of the light, and gallium indium arsenide, gallium indium phosphide can do a good job harvesting more of the visible spectrum. Such structures are enormously complicated structures. Actually, making a light-emitting diode is an easy task compared to a triple heterojunction layer, because you need each material as p-type and n-type layer, and most important, you need contacts. These contacts you can either call tunnel diodes or you call them recombination layers. Both names describe the same effect. One kind of carrier is recombining, and in this way you get current through the whole structure. You have to match all the structures so that the same current goes through the same structure. So this is really why it is a challenge. And this is much too expensive to be used on Earth in a normal solar panel. These structures are very good in space. I never understood that our good friend Picard, for his solar airplane, did not resort to those type of solar cells, and he could have had double the electric power for his very breakthrough airplane. He used crystalline silicon solar cells and had to live with only half of the power. But if you think about what went into this construction of this solar airplane, spending a little bit more on the solar cells would have been a pretty good idea. On ground, on Earth, you can still make it cost effective by cutting such a wafer in tiny solar cells, like 2 by 2 square millimeter, placing them under a collecting optic. So the optic concentrates the light on this high efficiency solar cell, and as a matter of fact, the efficiency increases with light intensity, because each solar cell has a certain amount of defects of recombination channels, and if you increase the light intensity, you overwhelm the recombination mechanism. So you can reach higher layers. These are different ways to go further to include wafer bonding, and at the end of the day, with an indium phosphide engineered substrate and using wafer bonding, and because you cut out of one wafer 1,000 solar cells, even wafer bonding is cost effective. There we reach the current world record, which is now the absolute record of converting solar power to electricity of 46%. And this is already very close to being useful in this concentrated solar applications. And you saw a part of this table just a moment ago in Michael Gretzel's talk. So let me just finish by talking about where we are going with this technology. And to be very honest, at the moment, it's all crystalline silicon technology. We have a very quick development of the PV market. I always like to show this old picture from 2010. In 2010, there was Zarazin Bank, and in 2010, the world market was just about 15 gigawatts per year of production. And Zarazin was bold enough to predict for 2020 a 110 gigawatt market. However, each year, the real development was much better than Zarazin had expected. Just take the year 2016. Zarazin had predicted for 2016 about 50 gigawatt, and we were at 70 gigawatt. So my prediction is this 110 gigawatt for 2020 is again a conservative prediction. This means that in the next 5 years, the world market of photovoltaic will further double. So we need to double actually all the production which we have already established. Photovoltaics, as you know, has come through a roller coaster development, because in 2012, when the world market was on a level of 30 gigawatt, the production capacity, particularly in China, was double this amount. And the result was prices collapsed, companies went bankrupt, many companies couldn't survive, there were takeovers, but during all this very, very tumultuous times, the world market of PV kept increasing, and today the distance between world production capacity and world market is no longer so large. So the next 5 years will see another doubling. As I said, it will be very interesting which companies will be at the end the winner. At the moment, all the bets are this will be Chinese companies. In March last year, we had a workshop in Freiburg where we discussed where are we going in the future. There were friends from NREL, from AIST in Japan, even from Australia, and we came to the conclusion that we expect 2030 that we will have installed a couple of terawatts, between 3 and 5 terawatts, 3 and 5,000 gigawatts of PV power. And to put it into a real perspective, look at this graph from the International Energy Agency. This International Energy Agency in Paris is a pretty conservative energy watch group, and of course mainly based in the direction of oil and nuclear power. But even they say 2050 we could have several terawatts. You see how much more conservative they are compared to what I just showed you. But even with this quite conservative picture, when you look at where we are today we have worldwide installed 300 gigawatts. So the big time of photovoltaics will happen in the next 20 years, when we go from 300 gigawatts to 3,000 gigawatts. And if we at the end harvest 1/3 of the world's needs out of photovoltaics, we need 30,000 gigawatts, 30 terawatts installed power. So this is really what is coming along, and there will be, of course, a very exciting time for anybody working in decreasing costs and bringing the costs down. So I would like to conclude that we are moving into the terawatt. This will happen anyway, because at costs of 2 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour, even the nuclear fusion reactor, which they built in France, the ITER, which of course will not yet produce real electricity, but it is a very important step. Their conceptual goal is to make electricity for 5 cents per kilowatt hour. And I tell you, in 2070 or whenever any useful electricity can be created, there is no more interest in electricity for 5 cents per kilowatt hour if we can get it from the sun for 2 cents per kilowatt hour. Very important are further technology advancements, research. We are all part of this, of course. And of course, I have not talked about the issue not only of solar cells, but as well storage, because of course, sun doesn't shine in the night. We all know this, and even the wind doesn't blow around the clock. So we need, of course, to invest not only in the power generation, we need as well the power storage. And we made a big analysis in Germany, and we came to the conclusion, yes, it is possible to make a cost-effective, renewable energy-based electricity supply for a country like Germany. Let me discuss a little bit the opportunities for our topic here, artificial photosynthesis. First of all, I think it is one of the most exciting and challenging. I think your word from if the leaf can do it, so can we, is a very wise word, and of course, you're completely right. The starting point is, of course, and this was pointed out as well, nature has worked on this for hundreds of millions of years and still has only this very low efficiency. And if you appreciate this complicated, incredibly complicated process, how nature does it, it's not surprising. So we have a starting point which is not very good. Of course, we always have what I call the trivial process, and this we can already do today. You know, we can use photovoltaics at 20, 30, 40% efficiency. We can couple it with electrolysis. We can use the surplus power available at times when sun and wind provide so much power that we cannot all use it up for our life and for traffic and so forth. And then, of course, we can implement artificial photosynthesis on a large scale using the electricity created out of renewable energies. We can, of course, and we saw some of these structures, integrate the photovoltaics into a water splitting scheme. And of course, what we saw from Michael Gretzel was a mixture, right? Because there was a direct water splitting with the nanorods, but there was as well a platinum electrode for conventional electrolysis. My problem with this concept is, if you really want to do this on the gigawatt scale, you would have square kilometers of solar panels, and you would have to have tubing to collect the hydrogen. And I think tubing is subject to being clogged and having to be serviced. I wonder if it does not, at the end of the day, for those gigawatt scale power needs of the world, come out to be much easier to collect electricity and to use electricity than if it's a surplus electricity to make hydrogen. So the holy grail of the direct solar watting splitted aided by optimized catalysts is a very exciting research. I am very happy that this research is funded because there are so many intricate processes which we learn on this way, and we have no idea where it will be interesting for us, for the world, for technology. But I think still we will have to see whether we can reach with this the efficiency of the trivial option going for photovoltaics, using lowest cost photovoltaics on square kilometers areas and then converting the excess electricity to hydrogen. So artificial photosynthesis will come in large scale, but which of the three approaches will be the one, you probably can guess what is my expectation. Thank you so very much for your attention.